Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Resideo webinar session on pressure reducing valves. My name is Jamie Quanroot, and I'm part of the Resideo sales training team. And on behalf of all of us, I'd like to welcome you to our training session today. Before we get started with our technical presentation, I'm going to cover just a few administrative items. Every week we give you 2 opportunities to learn about our products. Please join us every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time and every Thursday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time for a schedule of all of our future webinars on a variety of Resideo topics. Please visit resideo.com/webinars for more information. Additionally, we have launched a resource page on the resideo.com website where we are posting the recordings of our previous webinars for your reference as well. For those contractors who are joining us for today's live session, and you are interested in earning 1 NATE continuing education credit, there are just a few things to note. If you provided your NATE ID on your registration form, we will be submitting that information to NATE for crediting for your attendance of today's live session, and we don't need any additional information from you at this time. However, if you did not provide us with your NATE ID on your registration form for this webinar and you'd like to receive credit for attending our live session, we do ask that you email your first name, your last name, your NATE ID, and the session name that you attended to homes.university@resideo.com 1 week from today. This information is submitted to NATE 1 week following the close of today's session. Any requests sent outside of 1 week from today's live training cannot be processed. And then also, as a reminder, we can only process requests for NATE credits when you attend the live webinar sessions, and we are unable to process requests for watching a recorded version of this session. For more information about the NATE program, please visit their website at www.natex.org. And then one quick note for everyone before we begin our technical presentation today. All attendees are muted. However, if at any point during the technical presentation you'd like to ask a question, and we welcome questions, please use the Q&A feature found in your Zoom webinar controls at the bottom of your screen. We are reserving the last 15 minutes of our time today to answer any questions that you may have. So as we progress through today's technical training, please be sure to ask any questions in that Q&A feature so that we can address it at the end of today's session. Now we're going to turn things over to Chris Tamino. Chris is our East Coast water sales leader for Resideo. Chris is an expert in plumbing and water products and is going to provide our technical training today. Thanks so much for being here with us today, Chris. Take it away.
Hey, thanks, Jamie, and thank you all for joining us on this webinar series. As Resideo, we want to first start out by saying, the global coronavirus health emergency is changing the context in which we are doing business. We know this situation is unprecedented, and you may face uncertainties within your own businesses. We are here to help to make you as successful as possible by providing accurate information about the virus and our solutions so you can make reasonable and truthful recommendations to homeowners who are reaching out and asking for solutions. I would like to personally say that as a member of the service industry, we are a part of what makes the foundation of our country moving forward. With heat, air conditioning, air quality, plumbing, and mechanical services, you keep us comfortable as we can be in these uncomfortable days. So I would like to say thank you for putting yourself at risk every day while continuing to do your job. So here is our Honeywell Home water portfolio in its entirety. We offer both potable and hydronic, where you can, on the hydronic side of things, we can offer zone valves, zone circulator pumps. These are 3-speed pumps that are easily replaced with a universal flange assembly. We have zone control panels, both for switching relays, zone valves, and we have our AQ panel, which has the ability to do both. We have boiler trim kits, which makes installation of the boilers simplified, TRV controls, and combo valve and relays, boiler feed valves and backflow preventer regulators. And on the potable side of things, we have mixing valves, commercial size mixing valves, pressure reducing valves, filtration components, and water leak detectors. So looking a little bit deeper in our potable portfolio, at the top you'll see our AM1 series mixing valve, which is a three-way mixing valve that has a patented Teflon coating on it. This helps with longevity, and if you have harder water in your system, this prevents from any premature breakdowns. We have an AMX high flow series mixing valve. You will see this on an indirect water heater because they consist of higher flows. MX commercial style mixing valve, which goes up to 3-inch flanged. You can also use this as a diverting valve in chilled water systems. This also comes prepared with a recirc loop in case if you have a recirculation system. UMV 500, which is a undersink mixing valve. This has 3/8 ports. You can either use it as a 4-port mixing valve or a 3-port mixing valve, depends on the situation of your faucet. And then we have a sediment filter with an optional automatic blowdown option. We have wireless Wi-Fi water leak detectors that comes prepared with a 4-foot rope, but you can also extend that rope all the way up to 800 feet. We have a water leak alert that attaches to your water heater, and then we have universal replacement gas valves for OEM like Bradford White, A.O. Smith, and Rheem. And up at the top, we also have a mixing valve that is industry known as the tank booster. If you put this on a tank style water heater, you can get potentially 35% more of the tanked capacity. This also comes with a pre-tempered port in case you have a washdown station, and a recirc port if you have a recirculation system within the home. And then on the cold side, you have a separate port for either a temperature gauge or a pressure gauge so you can monitor your incoming pressure. And then up at the top, we have our DS06 and our FK06 pressure reducing valves. And that's what we're going to be doing a deep dive on today. So we're going to be talking about the importance of a PRV and the features and benefits of the DS06 and what makes the FK06 special, because it does come with a 50 micron stainless steel filter. So let's start out by talking about what is a pressure reducing valve. A pressure reducing valve simply takes higher water pressure from the street and reduces it down to a manageable, safe pressure to prevent any fixtures like toilets, faucets, laundry machines, and any other potable water fixtures within a house from failing prematurely. If the house street pressure is coming in at 80 psi or above, it is code that you need to install a pressure reducing valve to protect these parts. And also, if you actually shut down your faucet and you noticed a banging within your water pipes, also known as water hammer, this is a high indication of high water pressure within your home. So I would recommend calling a licensed plumber to either check your PRV that you currently have in line or install one. So here you see the DS06 and the VF06. So the VF06 is our closed loop pressure reducing valve made for hydronic systems. There's a significant difference between the two, and starting out by cost. The cost of the DS06 is a little bit higher because of the parts that go into building one of these, and they are also lead free. And the rangeability of the DS06 goes between 25 and 90 psi. And then the VF06, which is made for boiler systems, goes from 8 to 50 psi. And then the max input pressure for the DS06 is 250 pounds on the inlet side, and on the VF06 is a max of 150 pounds. So you can see a significant difference between the two. So if you are in a situation where you're looking at a pressure reducing valve on a closed loop boiler system, make sure you're picking the correct pressure reducing valve. And I will also like to note that they both have a output gauge port. They're just in a different location. So talking about a potable system, what makes high pressure? Well, the higher the elevation of your municipal water tower, the higher the street pressure is. So sometimes also if your city is above or below the water table, or above the water table, I'm sorry, your municipalities will install a pump station so you can get the correct pressure up into your city. Now this can create inconsistencies with your water pressure. So not only does the DS06 reduce the amount of pressure to make sure it's a safe, manageable operating pressure. It also regulates inconsistent pressure going in. So for example, if you have a case where you are opening a faucet and then your son or daughter, or whoever else is in the house, opens up a faucet on the other side, and all of a sudden you see a reduction in pressure on that specific faucet, that's a huge swing. And then also sometimes if you just randomly open up a faucet and you're washing your hands by yourself and you see a significant reduction and no one else is using any other fixtures in the house, that is a clear indication of inconsistent incoming water pressure. So what does our PRV do? Well, like I said before, it takes street pressure, which is high street pressure, 80 psi or above, and inconsistent water pressure, and it reduces down to a manageable pressure down to 25 psi. This prevents any kind of premature failures on washing machines, dishwasher, spigots, and any other water fixtures in the house. So the speed of water flow from the open tap is determined by the amount of pressure in the system at that time. The higher the water pressure, the stronger the water force. Water pressure beyond normal requirements for fixtures and appliances can cause damage. So again, plumbing code does require that you install a PRV if your incoming water pressure meets or exceeds 80 psi. So we're talking about premature damage on fixtures and other things in that aspect. But I also want to mention that installing a PRV helps to prevent or helps to support water conservation. Installing a water PRV could save between 30,000 and 40,000 gallons of water a year. This could equate to hundreds of dollars a year spent in your water usage. So how does that pressure reducing valve work? So it's a self-contained pressure reducing valve with a counteracting spring based on the incoming pressure. So when you set the desired output pressure, the spring within the bonnet will compress downwards onto a diaphragm cartridge. This restricts the incoming water, slowing it down to a safe, manageable water pressure. And this will also support the amount of water going into the house. So if you have fixtures that add up to, let's just say, for example, 45 gallons per minute, if you add up all your fixtures. When you reduce that PSI, you are allowing a certain amount of gallons per minute going into the home, and you're supporting the water conservation, and you're not overusing the water. So notice that there is 2 internal screens with our DS06. This is a unique design on our DS06 that increases the longevity of our system. So if you have dirty water or any kind of silt or debris going into your system, it will go through these screens and it will protect the inner workings of this valve. It doesn't necessarily filter the system, filter the water going into your house, but we do have an option for that. If you have inconsistent water pressure, the spring will automatically compress or decompress, holding the diaphragm in place to maintain the outlet pressure. So that's how the valve actually maintains swings in your incoming pressure, so that when you set that spring, that pressure that you're setting, it will know to move up or down based on the incoming flow. So where would you normally see a PRV installed? The installation of a PRV should be after the water main shutoff and after the water meter, but before any fixtures, including mechanical equipment, including a boiler system. However, the irrigation system sometimes could be piped before it, but a lot of times it'll have its own PRV and testable check valve assembly in the case of sudden loss of pressure. So the DS06 can be installed both vertically and horizontally, but I would also like to point out that we do have a gauge port on either side of it. So make sure if you're using that gauge port, you have access to those so you can read the downstream pressure or the outgoing pressure of the valve. The FK06, on the other hand, can be installed horizontally. This is because you want to have maximum filter performance, and you want to make sure you can get to that filter to either blow it down or replace it or clean it if need be. So moving on a little bit deeper in the installation orientation. So in the instance of an expansion tank is installed on a water heater, please be sure to check that the air pressure within that expansion tank matches the outgoing set pressure of your PRV. Also, check to make sure that a check valve is installed for forcing the thermal expansion from the tank back into the diaphragm of the expansion tank. We do not want that thermal temperature water going back to the DSO6 or the FKO6. Although we do have a thermal bypass within that DSO6 that if you do have some water going back into it, it will be protected to a certain amount. But I would still urge you to use an expansion tank, when it comes to tank protection and efficiency on the tank water heater. So if you have thermal expansion going all the way back in the cold water line, it's going to make that water heater operate a little bit more. Therefore, you're going to be losing some annual fuel utilization efficiency or the energy efficiency rating if you're using an electric water heater. So here is our two residential light commercial lineup PRVs. They're both dial set, and they're also easily rebuildable, so you can access the inner workings of this valve in line, assuming that there is isolation valves on either side. And then we also have the FKO6 that comes with a unique 50 micron stainless steel filter that can be removed and cleaned, or you could just blow it down if need be. So looking at this picture here, this is a broken down image of what it takes to build and what's inside of our DSO6. And obviously the FKO6 is very similar to this other than having the filter at the bottom. So at the top, you'll see the dust cap that comes shipped with the filter or with the DSO6. This is a tamper resistant valve, and this is adding to anybody going in and messing with the actual PRV. So it's a black cap, sits right on top of the dial knob, and then below that is the locking screw. So this screw is significant because when you are actually commissioning or testing the valve, you're going to want to loosen up that screw, and that will release the dial ring so you can make your adjustments downstream. So when you're done making your adjustments, please tighten up that screw so it locks it in place. So there's two ways you can get this valve to be tamper-free or tamper-resistant. And then going below that, we have the bonnet, which protects the spindle. And so when you're spinning the adjustment, that spindle makes the adjustments against the spring, pushing down the washer, which is essentially adjusting the cartridge, which is a wet cartridge. So you can see what it takes to build this PRV as strong as it is, and this is a quality product. And I also like to point out that we do have two filters. So one filter is actually on the cartridge, and then there's a bottom filter within that little cup on the bottom there. So added protection to make sure that this valve lasts long. So moving on, this is our D15S. This is the high flow commercial industrial valve that goes from 2.5 inch all the way up to 4 inch anti-flanged, and that's a 150-pound flange. So this is a self-contained, unpiloted PRV. And you'll see these a lot, in large commercial applications. What makes this valve unique is that it has both an inlet and an outlet pressure gauge, and the rangeability goes from 22 to 90 PSI. So like the DSO6 and the FKO6, we simplified by taking 14 serviceable parts within the DSO6 and building it into one affordable, easy to replace cartridge. So I would always recommend when you're installing one of these, make sure you have isolation valves inside, because you're not going to want to take this out and replace it. You just take the bonnet off, remove that cartridge, and then swap it out. And this, I will also like to point out that this is a stainless steel cartridge. So again, if you have harder water, this will withstand the conditions. So PRVs this is the full lineup, and the Honeywell Home PRV lineup meets the ASSC 1003 certification, the CSA certified, NSF 61, and 372 compliant, and it is also IAMO listed. So all three of these are listed with all the federal requirements to be installed in a home or a commercial application. So here's a picture of our factory. Honeywell Home Resideo PRV lineup are made in MOSBACH, Germany. This factory has been operating for more than 50 years, and we take great pride knowing our products are built and tested in this location. So talking about MOSBACH a little bit, it's in Germany just south of Frankfurt. MOSBACH is also known for their timber-framed houses, and most famous for the Palm House built in 1618. So I just put this in here because I really think it's a cool city, and if you ever have the opportunity to go to our factory, this is where you would stay. You know, the timber style houses, I've always liked that. I lived in Colorado for a while, so if you go up in Vail, it actually looks a lot like Vail, Colorado. So just a cool little fun fact there for you guys. So here's what makes a quality product like the DS06. In our plant, every PRV is bench tested before it leaves the factory. The first image is a burst test with water to ensure that it meets and exceeds the pressure specs of the 250 PSI. And the second image is another water test that we do to make sure that all the seals and all the threaded fittings and everything within the valve are tight. So we do 2 wet tests before it leaves the factory. So moving on to the nomenclature and how we read out our valve. So first you'll see the DS, that simply means dial set, and if you see the FK, it means filter kit. And then the second 2 numbers, 06, it indicates a 1/4 inch MPT gauge port that monitors the downstream pressure. The corresponding numbers represents the size offering. So if you see a 101, that means it's a 3/4 valve, a 100 is a 1/2 inch valve, a 102 is a 1 inch valve, and so on and so forth. But I also like to point out that if there is no number in this section, that means that is a body only unionless PRV. You would see those in a lot of new construction applications, and I'll explain that a little bit farther down the slide deck. And then the next 2 letters, they indicate the actual amount of unions that are being shipped. So if you see an SU, that's a single union with just an open end thread on one end, and then the double or DU is a double union, so it comes with both unions. And then the last number within those is either S or T, and sweat. S means sweat, and T means NPT female. And then LF is obviously lead free, and then U is unit pack. So here's a snapshot of what the nomenclature looks like for the FK06. Pretty much the same other than the FK, but we do have the size offering is a little bit different, so you might want to make a note of that. We do offer it between 3/4 and 1.25 inches. Okay, so why use the Resideo PRV? Well, we have an easy to read downstream pressure gauge, so it simplifies setting it up. Traditionally, what you would need to do is put a downstream pressure gauge on either a hose bib or a laundry sink to test or commission, whereas all we need to do is loosen up the screw on the top, set that number to whatever the desired downstream pressure is, screw that screw back down, and then you're all set. So the adjustment is very simple. We have a 1/4 inch NPT downstream pressure port on either side of the valve. So once you install that pressure gauge, you can easily monitor the operation of this valve at that point. So let's say if you get a call from your homeowner says, I have either water hammer, I have inconsistent water pressure, or anything that could be a nuisance call. You go to the call, you already have your pressure gauge there. You don't have to add any of the hose gauge on your hose bib. It's right there for you. So simplified service, simplified testing, and simplified setup. But then also assuming that there's isolation valves installed on either side of the valve, you don't actually have to take the valve out to rebuild it. You can access all the cartridges, the springs, and all the serviceable items from the top on it, and then you can also get the other filter from the bottom. And I also like to say that you can upgrade the DS06 to an FK06 by removing that bottom cup and then putting in the filter bowl assembly on the bottom. So that's a really nice feature for service contracts and service guys that have service contracts for customers that have, a lot of dirt and silt within their water line. And again, what makes the DS06 or the FK06 special rather? Well, again, the stainless steel filter, you can add it to a DS06. This adds protection to, tankless water heaters, faucet aerators, water heaters. It'll prevent from the, that silt buildup on the bottom of the water heater and other, water components that could be affected by heavy dirt and debris. And the filter kit is, there's a blowdown option on the filter kit, and also you can remove it and clean it. So it's a really nice upgraded version of the DS06 that has all the same features and benefits as it, just some added features. As an old service tech, I look at this as a great opportunity to upsell some good features to a homeowner. So let's move on to sizing your PRV. I would always urge you to never line size a PRV. So when a home is built, the PRV and incoming water line is sized for that specific condition. So when you're going to a service call, be sure to ask the homeowner or building manager if any changes or updates have been made to the dwelling. In-home water conditions, it could change if a bathroom is added or a hose bib is installed, or if you do any kind of low flow toilets or anything for that matter, a lot of those gallons per minute and your pressure requirements could change. So make sure you are looking at every condition you have when you're going into a home. So this is a little chart you can use to help with sizing your PRV. This portrays the fall-off pressure. So the fall-off pressure is a reduction of pressure at the outlet of a pressure reducing valve. When downstream fixtures are open to allow flow through the PRV, if, for an example, the PRV is set for 70 psi, that is the static pressure setting and represents the PRV downstream pressure in a no-flow condition. As soon as the fixture starts to open, water begins to flow through the PRV and the downstream pressure will fall. More open fixtures mean more flow through the PRV, resulting in more fallout pressure. The amount of fallout pressure depends on inlet water pressure of the PRV and the size and design of the PRV and flow rate through the valve. So again, sum of all fixtures. So when you're sizing your PRV, take the sum of all of your fixtures, the gallons per minute, the required pressure, and make sure you're looking at the fallout pressure. So testing and commissioning a valve. This is important, and this is also recommended annually to do to prevent any kind of premature failure or damage. So assuming you don't have a 1/4-inch NPT gauge on it, install a MGTH, which is a male garden hose thread gauge at a utility sink, a outdoor hose bib, or you could just install the 1/4-inch NPT pressure gauge on the DS06 or the FK06. Make sure your testing point is downstream of the installed PRV and make sure that that hose bib is open. So once you open that bib, look at the pressure gauge and make sure it stops at the PRV set point. So if you have your downstream pressure set at 45, make sure that your gauge reads 45. If the pressure set point matches, open up another faucet within the dwelling and make sure that that valve or that gauge does not drop significantly. Now, if it drops and it equalizes, that means that valve is operating correctly. But if it drops and it stays down below plus or minus 4 psi, you're going to want to repair or replace that valve. Now, if you get a call that your valve is either chattering or squealing while it's in operation, before you do these tests, I would isolate the valve to make sure that any screens internal are free and clear. So the tools you're going to need to test and commission. You're going to need a 0 to 300 psi or a 200 psi MGHT, which is a male garden hose thread gauge. You're going to need an open end wrench or a crescent wrench. You're going to need an 8-in-1 screwdriver and an 8mm Allen wrench. I would urge you to not use a pair of channel locks for that plastic that's on top of the bonnet. Although it's a high pressure, well-built plastic, it's just channel locks can be a little abrasive at times, and you don't want to leave any marks and having the homeowner ask any questions about it. So listed in this slide are the parts available for the DS06 and the FK06. Notice that the letters are listed as a constant, and where the asterisks are represents the numbers that change based on what size you may be rebuilding. So you have the D06FA, which is the cartridge. You have the ES06F, which is the screen within the cartridge. You have the K06U, which is the tailpiece option. You have the 2728, which is just simply as a rubber gasket, or the KF06 if you want to either replace the actual bowl for the FK06 or if you want to upgrade the DS06. And then you have the AS06, which is the stainless steel screen. If you want more details about this, I would refer to page 14 in the Honeywell Home Resideo Whole Home Water Solutions catalog. Or you can always reach out to your local rep or distributor. So we also offer a jumper kit. in the case of a new construction application, this jumper kit allows you to install on the rough portion of the project. So you install this. This matches the face-to-face dimension of a body-only DSO6. It does come with a screen, so if you do have a lot of copper debris or dirt or anything like that, it will protect the house, during the construction phase of the dwelling. So you can install this, and it also prevents against any kind of theft. So if you are building a home in a high-risk area, you put this in, and any kind of theft is reduced quite a bit. I've heard many stories in the Southern California area where they make, a lot of contractors put these in on their tract homes, and they've actually saved thousands of dollars on theft.
Thanks, Chris. You can
Thank
find
you.
information on the water products that Chris reviewed in our training today at the new Resideo.com website. And also following today's webinar, you are going to receive a follow-up email that details all the information that Chris reviewed today with all of us, including information on where to find webinar information for our upcoming sessions as well. Now we're going to transition into answering some common questions, and we're going to have Sam Raymakers, who is the water product manager, join Chris now to answer some common questions. And then after that, we are going to transition into answering some of the questions that have come in through the chat. So just a quick reminder, if you do have any questions, please go ahead and enter those in the Q&A function that are found in your Zoom webinar controls. So I'm going to turn things back over to Chris and to Sam.
Thank you, Jamie. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sam Raymaker. I'm on the product management team at Resideo, specifically overseeing the water offering that we have, which includes the potable, which we talked about here today, as well as the hydronic solutions. With that, I wanted to say on behalf of Resideo, we are very, very glad to have you with us today. So Chris, thank you so much for giving us an entry-level presentation on what a PRV is and highlight some of the items that that we have for our customers and our homeowners.
Absolutely.
A couple questions that are more common I'd like to kind of walk through as our other questions from our attendees are coming into our chat here. What happens? What does it mean if my valve, my PRV is chattering or whistling?
So first, I'm going to walk you through the steps on what you would want to do to check. So first, check the outgoing pressure of the valve. You want to make sure that it's actually set correctly and operating correctly. And then if that checks out, make sure that your incoming water pressure doesn't meet or exceed 250 PSI. If these steps check out, please isolate that valve and take out those screens that I had mentioned earlier in the slide and make sure that it's free and clear of any dirt or debris. Dirt and debris can cause, a numerous amount of restrictions within the cartridge. So if that valve is trying to maintain the outgoing pressure, it'll kind of like vibrate when it's in operation. And then if anything is stuck inside there, it'll kind of do like a bouncing thing and it'll echo throughout the pipeline. So that can be a huge annoyance in, for your homeowner and actually create, premature failure.
Oh, very good. No, it's important just to highlight a couple of those items that with any PRV for that matter, just best practices, right? So do appreciate that answer on that one.
Sure.
Chris, could you share with us, I guess, what thermal expansion is and how it is somewhat related to a PRV and how would it affect operation of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when your water heater is heating up, your hot water is naturally going to go to cold, and it expands. So if you don't have a let's say a check valve or a double backflow or double check valve assembly or anything for that matter, and that high temperature trickles back to your PRV, over time it will deteriorate the diaphragm within there. So, and then you also don't want to reduce the efficiency rating of the tank. So if it's heating up, you're losing that heat back through the cold water. So you're going to want to isolate it by using a check valve. But that check valve is going to want to be orientated, above your expansion tank, because you're going to want that expansion to go into the tank. If you have a check valve without the expansion tank, knowing that the T&P valve is set for 150 50 psi on a tank type water heater, you're going to have a nuisance call where that thing is constantly going to be dripping. So make sure if you have an expansion tank, you have a check valve going into it, protecting the PRV. And then if you don't have a expansion tank and a check valve, and you have a drippy TMP valve, make sure to look at that too.
I appreciate that explanation. I mean, for folks, in the regions that don't have typically expansion tanks on their hot water heater system, it's something that we don't normally think of. So we take pride as the with our Resideo experts on just best practices on installs and for a PRV or really for anything. So appreciate bringing that topic up here. What does it matter? Does it matter if my PRV is installed vertically or horizontally? And what's kind of the takeaway on that question?
Well, again, as a service guy in the past, I would definitely make sure. Well, let me take a step back. The DS06, no, you can install it both vertically or horizontally. But again, you want to make sure that you have easy accessibility to either rebuild or replace it. Knowing that you could rebuild this valve quite simply and for low cost, I would just probably go ahead and say you're going to want to put it horizontally. And then, that would also open you up to an option to upsell to the FK06, knowing that the FK06 is recommended to be installed horizontally only for maximum filter performance and serviceability. That this opens you up to a great option for an upsell down the road. So yes, the DS06 will work in both positions, but it is highly recommended to do it in a horizontal application to open you up for new opportunities down the road.
Super. And you're spot on, right? I would say the real takeaway is accessibility. Our products are very well engineered and built, and they can be put in really any orientation, but accessibility, that's what's important to us. So having it be adaptable and whatnot is a good takeaway.
Yeah.
So Chris, what's the warranty of our DS06 and FK06 pressure reducing valves?
It's quite simply a limited 2-year warranty, and it's based on install date.
It's pretty good and pretty standard, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Good. Is there an auto flush option for the FK06, and what does that mean?
There isn't a auto flush option for the FK06, and basically what that is, it's a timer you can set up to automatically flush down that bowl that's attached to it. The reason why we don't want to do that is because we want the technician to almost look at that body or look at that bowl, because it is transparent when they go in to do any kind of annual service, and bring it up to the homeowner and say, you know what, we just installed this last year and I can notice that you have a lot of dirt and debris inside here. Maybe we can take it to the next step and test your water quality, make sure that the grains per gallon are within a comfortable range. So it gives you the ability to add it into a service contract, to do an annual blowdown, and it also creates the awareness of the actual water quality itself by having a transparent bowl.
Super. So our FK obviously has that filter at the bottom, and it has a little purge valve.
Yeah.
And with the pressure that's already in it and the orientation, it is a good item to have on a service contract, right?
Yeah, it is. And, I would add, so if you do install the FK06 and you do have, any kind of a drain close by, you're going to want to make sure that you have a 1-inch air gap below it. Try not to thread anything onto it that's permanent, because if there is a sudden loss of pressure, you don't want to have any kind of back siphonage going through there. So make sure you have your 1-inch air gap below it if you have a drain. But a lot of times I don't really see anybody hooking a drain up to it, because you just don't want anybody to say, hey, I could just blow this down at any time. You want to make sure that the service tech or the installer has full control of the serviceability of that unit.
Excellent. And then last question on our common items here. What other than codes and standards, we know that in some areas of the country, it's actually mandatory. You need one of these in your house, whether it's new construction or existing structure. But codes and standards aside, what are also common uses for our PRVs?
So, pertaining to the question on here, I'll kind of dive in on the importance of putting the FK06 in line to a tankless water heater. As many of us know, the heat exchanger and a tankless water heater has really, really tiny, small capillaries where the water flows through it. So if you do have hard water and you're constantly heating that water up to, let's just say 140 to 160 degrees in a short amount of time, you're going to have residue build up. And I know that, you know, when I was a service tech, you put it into your service contract to do an annual flush with either white distilled vinegar or a flow aid on those tankless water heaters. By installing the FK06 in line, you can actually get some more longevity out of that serviceability on that tank. And it also makes, you know, it makes the homeowner a little bit happier knowing that, you know, they have some extra protection protecting an expensive device like a tankless water heater, heat exchanger, you know, that they just invested a bunch of money in. So, and that goes with any of the fixtures on the FK06. So
Super. Yep. And I can also attest to that as well. We've seen a very large trend, obviously, in our industry with tankless water heaters. It's a great product, but the FK06, it pairs extremely well with that type of product and install. So
yeah, it supports the efficiency too by maintaining a constant outgoing pressure. So if you have major swings, again, that tankless water heater could potentially short cycle. It could do all sorts of crazy stuff if you have massive fluctuation in pressure. So it's twofold there. So maintaining incoming pressure and doing some preventative maintenance while your service tech is not around.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Chris, so much for these common questions and your answers here. And now the fun begins, right? And I appreciate all of you, and also remind you all to put in all of the questions you may have on our PRV line, and I'll be pitching them here to Chris, and appreciate all the ones coming in so far. So without further ado, let's start out with the first question here. Chris, I got a question from Stephanie. She had asked, how do you upgrade from the DS06 to the FK06? What's needed? How easy? How cheap?
Well, I always have, you're gonna have to refer to your local distributor for pricing on that. But you know, I'm gonna go back to the slide here where it shows the two parts that you're gonna need. So you're gonna need that KF06, and obviously that changes based on what size you have. So please, you know, look at our catalog. And then you're going to need the AS06, which is the stainless steel filter. So, and really all you need to do is isolate the valve, drain the side, you know, the outgoing side in the house, you know, the water out of there. So you're not fighting with a drip. And then you take that black cap off the bottom of the DS06, and then you just simply put in the screen and then thread on that plastic bowl. That's also a gasketed bowl, so you don't need any Teflon or pipe dope or anything for that matter. So it's a really, really simple upgrade, and I can tell you it is very inexpensive.
Yep. No, good answer. Good answer. I think the takeaway on that is very simple. Parts are available, and it is a great upsell opportunity, right?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Next question. I got one from Kevin. Are you going to be offering the PRV in ProPress? And actually, Chris, I'll take this question if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Kevin, this ProPress, we all know press fittings are very, very quickly growing trend in our industry, and Resideo has been adding on to, specifically starting with our hydronics, a number of press iterations of fittings in those, but we've also done it in our potable offering. We have it in our mixing valves today and so forth. Today, we don't have it available in our DS06 or FK06 line, but it's one that I am currently working on to get out to you guys as soon as possible. In addition to that, also looking at putting push connect, so otherwise known as the SharkBite connector, but also a PEX connector for our PRV line with the inclusion of press as well. So fittings, we know it's important. Press is growing, and looking forward to bringing these out to you guys as soon as possible.
Hey Sam, I'd like to add to that too. In the meantime, you know, I don't think I mentioned that if you do buy the body only valve without the unions, that there is NPT threads on the inside of the unions. So you can quite simply just get your male adapter and thread it right in there and do your press or push connect end within the body only PRV.
Yep, you're spot on. I mean, today what we have sweat iterations, we have thread and PT iterations, and like you said, unionless and body only. And since there's female NPT, We have a number of customers today, at least in the gap of us offering it, just screw in their press fittings and you're in business. So thank you for highlighting that as well.
Sure.
Next question I have here. Looks like I got a question from Ken. Can high water pressure thin down the walls of copper water lines? What do you think about that, Chris?
That's a great question. Yeah. So now we're talking about velocity. So as the pressure is increasing, you're going to have a lot of velocity while you open up a faucet. Not only does that create noise, like whistling outside of the PRV, you'll hear the whistling going through pipes and fittings and things like that. So over time, that will eat away at the lining of either most likely your copper. The PEX can actually hold up to it, but copper fittings, now that everything's being lead free, I've actually been into a whole bunch of houses where you can almost poke your finger right into a 3/4 inch water line because their water pressure is way too high. So, I mean, it's a long-term effect, but it is a very real effect.
Wonderful, wonderful. So a potential solution for that, right? PRV maybe?
Absolutely.
Good. Next question I got from a Charlie. It looks like jumper kit related. Can you test them? I've never heard of this concept before.
Do you want to answer that, Sam?
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. Throw back to that slide on the jumper kits. So as Chris mentioned, this is a accompanying product to a PRV. It's one that pairs very well together. We said that we have the sweated models, the NPT threaded models, but we also have the unionless. And for that sense, it's a good, let's say, solution paired together where you have the unionless PRV, but then you also purchase a jumper kit. And the whole idea behind it is that in areas where you are building new construction, whether that's high-rise or tract homes or whatever they might be, you sometimes don't know how long they might be unoccupied. And since these products are made out of some pretty heavy and expensive materials, such as lead-free bronze and brass, they also have a scrap value, right? And that concept behind a jumper kit is that you can actually pipe it into the house's system. So basically create the entire plumbing, but not let the PRV actually just stay there by itself. So you can pipe in the jumper kit, which utilizes the exact same unions that attach right to that PRV, but then you also have the tube, which you can see on the bottom left-hand side, that allows you to not only test the system with media, such as water, but you can also air test it as well. As soon as that home becomes occupied again, you can loosen the unions, drop out that tube, put in the unionless PRV, DSO6 or FK, and you're in business. And it's a really good solution. Certain areas of the country seem to do that more, but the concept could be used anywhere in the world. And it's been a really good solution for those that want to mitigate theft, vandalism, et cetera, et cetera.
I think this thing is awesome, Sam. I've always, if I was back out in the field, I would definitely use these, in new construction, or even when you're remodeling a house. A lot of times the homeowners aren't there. Putting one of these, it's a really, really cool little piece of equipment.
Sometimes the neatest things are the simple things, right?
That's right.
All right. Question from a Steven. Chris, what happens if you install a PRV backwards?
Well, when you install a PRV backwards, you probably wouldn't see much water going through the system, especially if you try to make any kind of adjustments. And I don't predict it lasting very long, but I will say that the direction of flow on the PRV is easily seen on there with an arrow. So if you do make the mistake and you do introduce water, you should be okay, but make sure you rectify that situation immediately, because you could potentially damage the valve.
All right. Are there any indicators on that product to kind of give you a indication of how to install?
I would say noise. You would have a lot of noise coming from it, a lot of like natural chattering, so definitely indicator with that. That being said, the adjustment, if you're making your adjustment, testing and commissioning, you don't see any change in flow. If you get any flow through it, that's a huge indicator. So yeah, definitely make sure you are going in the right direction.
Super, super, super. Let's see here. Question from Kelly. You mentioned that you can add a pressure gauge directly to this PRV. What kind of would I need to order from my distributor?
Just a simple quarter-inch NPT pressure gauge. I would, probably do a 0 to 100 psi, just in case if you do have higher water pressure, 150 psi, yeah, just in case if you have high water pressure going into the house, and the PRV fails or something were to happen, you can see where it increases to. So yeah, quarter-inch NPT pressure gauge, 0 to 150 psi.
Excellent, excellent. All right, got a question here from Ryan. Says, is the D15S available now? And actually, Chris, I'll take that question. So the D15S, which in review was that blue larger size PRV, which is generally used out there in the markets down in Southwest. You'll see them just running down the road. You'll see the pipes coming out of the ground. You'll see a product like that in addition to multifamily, et cetera, et cetera. We've made that product right there for a number of years in our factory in MOSBACH, and it's well apparent in Europe. And I currently have a project underway for this and will be available in our Americas portfolio here likely by the end of the year. Right now we're running through testing and certification, and I see no issues why I won't be here by the end of the year. So it'll be a good addition to our portfolio coming very, very soon. All right.
I actually can't wait for that to come out, Sam. I got the opportunity to have that valve in my possession for a while to do some research, and that is a very, very heavy duty valve in quality for sure. So I'm excited about that myself.
You bet, you bet. I'm excited to bring it on for us too. Next question I have from Kelly. It looks like, let's see here, service contracts. I generally use them very, very often in my business, and I've never thought to have a PRV in one. What has been your success rate on that? And can you get into a little bit more of what I would include in the service contract for a PRV?
So from a personal perspective, what we did was we actually did a whole home plumbing inspection. So what we would do is we would obviously first start out by the pressure. We would check the pressure at the house and to make sure that it is running at a safe, manageable PSI. So right then and there, you could check that off the list. We would always check to see what kind of fixtures they had in the house, how many fixtures they had in the house to ensure that the water line coming into the house was sized correctly. We would see what kind of toilets they would have and make sure that they were either an upgraded low flow water conservation style toilet or an old high flow toilet, and just kind of get a gathering of what the the home is. Is it plumbed with copper? Is it plumbed with CPVC, PEX, or anything like that? So we would actually have an initial full-on checklist, a 36-point inspection, and then we would have an annual touch just to make sure that everything is maintained. So that first initial inspection, a lot of the times we found that the pre-RV that was installed with the new construction of the home was forgotten about. So right then and there was an upsell to the homeowner when they got signed up on the service program. And then down the road, a lot of times we talked about water quality on that first initial touch. Many of the customers say, what, my water quality is fine. It's not that big of a deal. But on our second stop, we would actually bring it back up again. It's like, would you like me to check your water quality? And anything between, I would say, 30 grains per gallon all the way up to 45 grains per gallon. That opens up the door to add the filter bowl on the DS06. So that's kind of like what we did. And this also coincided with our service agreement for furnaces and boilers and things like that. So we had a separate service agreement for plumbing fixtures and the plumbing in the whole home as well. So that's kind of how we went to market with that when I was a service tech.
Yeah, no, service agreements are a fantastic offering, not only for those in our industry, but also for the homeowners, right? It's peace of mind, and sometimes you don't think about some plumbing products being on some of those agreements. So that was a great question, one that just keep in mind for those on the phone that are in that type of business. But again, it's the real values for the customer on that one. So
it is, and again, the PRV is often forgotten about in the home. Out of sight, out of mind. So, but it also, as you can see, it serves a very important role in the longevity of expensive fixtures in your house. So.
All right, I got another question. Actually, I got a couple more questions, but I got one from Terry here. Is the KF06 the correct number for the canister and stainless steel filter? And Chris, I'll take that one here. But Terry, in regards to upgrade, let's say the DS06 to an FK06, what you would need is, yes, the KF06, but then you'd also need the, if I recall right, the AS06, which is the micron filter. So the AS06 is the filter, the KF06 is the filter bowl. So you need those two items in order to upgrade it. We also have them in different sizes, right? So you'd want to make sure you have the right SKU. I believe there's 2 different ones for the KF, there's 2 different ones for the AS. Make sure you got the right size and you're in business for that.
Yeah, and again, I'd like to add, if you want to get in the dirty details on what those sizes are, it's on page 14 on our water catalog. So.
Good.
Thank you both. I think it's time for us to wrap up now. Thanks to Chris and Sam for answering the questions that have come through during our technical presentation today. Please join us every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time and every Thursday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time for our Resideo Customer Webinar Series, where we cover Resideo products and give you opportunities to learn about who we are and what we do and the products that we can bring to help you in your business. Also want to make sure that you are aware that we have launched a resource page on the resideo.com website where we post the recordings of our webinars. So if you'd like to reference that information at a later time, we do cover these sessions for you and have them posted out there on that website for your reference. And then finally, one reminder to contractors who did not include your NATE identification number on your registration form and you would like to receive credit for attending today's live session, please send your first name, your last name, and your NATE ID number to homes.university@resideo.com within 1 week of today's live webinar to receive credit for attending today's live session. And then 2 final things before we close today. Once our training session ends, you will be prompted to complete a survey regarding today's webinar session. Please take a few moments to provide us with your feedback on the training that you participated in today. We are looking forward to offering additional online webinar sessions going forward, and we do want to hear your feedback, especially on any topics you'd like us to cover in the future sessions. And then you will also be receiving an email from us in a few days that includes some follow-up information along with the link to our new webinar page, which lists our schedule of upcoming webinars. And we have just posted our May online webinar training session schedule. So please go ahead and take a look at that website to see what we are planning for you this month. And we will also be sharing a link to our recorded webinar session landing page as well in that follow-up email so that you have that for your reference. Thank you all for joining us on today's Resideo webinar session on pressure reducing valves. Please join us next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time where we cover our non-connected thermostat portfolio. Thank you again for attending today's live training session. Have a great day, everyone.